Smashing. So, how's your day been?
It's been good, thank you very much. How's yours been?
Yeah, it's been all right on annual leave because I work in a school, so education. So, on the half term week this week. So, yeah, a bit
Ah, I
different to your
see.
week.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, so I used to be a similar background to yours, but obviously being in education now, you obviously get the pre-planned holidays, etc. Whereas on the flip side of what you're doing, you sort of got annual leave, which is a little bit different. So it's nice to have the holidays planned in, but a bit of a loss sometimes when they come up.
No, absolutely.
So what does a typical day look like for you then? So how's the day gone?
I feel like it depends on the week and the day and the sessions you're delivering. Like a regular day for me was emails, admin, meetings, speaking to like external providers about delivering sports sessions, NCS, and engaging with the young people as best we can.
Sounds a good day then. A bit of a mix of operations and reaching out to different partners and
Yeah,
then planning for the week ahead. So it's a bit of a mix, which is a nice bag to have.
I know, absolutely.
So obviously we've met through social media, through LinkedIn, and every time I see
Yeah.
your LinkedIn and your posts and what you're putting out there, it's a very detailed scope of what you're doing, which is fantastic in terms of the delivery, the experience you have, what you're involved in now, and certainly your position that you're in. So I'm not sure if you wanted to take us through your sort of journey into where you're at now and how you've got there and what your decisions have been to get there.
Thank you. Do you mean career wise or?
Yeah, career wise is cool.
Yeah, so I started working when I was about 15, 16. Started as a waitress, did a bit of cleaning, and then I fell into volunteering with young people. And then from there, I've just worked with young people within the NHS, playing football, just working in that realm really, and then just seen there's a need for support for young people and just going with that really. So before this job I worked as a youth worker. Before that I worked in student support, and then before that I've worked in schools, and I've done campaigns and projects with a lot of young people and adults in regards to personal development.
So it sounds like a nice bag of experience in terms of adults, young people, that you set in which you've gone into the health services, sort of touching upon a little bit of education there, and it's a nice wide range in terms of when that brings that together. You've got those choices whether you're like, all right, I prefer working with adults or I prefer working with young people. So it's good sort of scope to have. But every time I speak to someone, I ask them how they got into their sort of industry. They always
Yeah.
tell me how they've fallen into it, and I sort of love that answer because it's very similar how I fell into sort of doing this, and also how I fell into doing sport myself. So, when it sort of wasn't planned and you fell into it, do you sort of look back and go, do you know what? That's actually great that I've ended up doing that.
No, I think yeah, definitely. I think in I wasn't really aware of what I was doing until maybe I moved into university and I realized the degree I was doing really coincided with the work I was doing. And then I was intentional about the opportunities, the campaigns, the jobs that I was being involved with, because I realized, it's experience in the field, and yeah, it really works well with my degree and I really enjoy it as well. So yeah, I guess it worked out, thankfully.
And I'm glad that it has worked out because obviously you're in a fantastic position now in terms of what you're doing and how that comes across. But I like what you say there about being intentional because, sometimes you can fall into opportunities, then you might end up spending, like 10 years in that sort of role in that position. And you might look back after 10 years ago and, do you know what, actually, that was the worst decision I could have made. Or it's just ended up life has rolled into one, you met someone, you have kids, and therefore it's ended up being the best position for you to be in because obviously you get that income and you're paying your mortgage, rent,
Yeah.
etc. But when you're intentional, it sort of gives you that scope now whereby you can look at, right, this is what I want to do in the next 5 years. This is my objectives. Perhaps this isn't exactly for me in the next 5 years, but I'd like to use it to project me into this field. So I think that's a really important point when some people, especially as we speak, around this topic of youth work, if some people can be lost in terms of what they do, but once they have that objective and that intention, it can then
Yeah.
project them into an area that they want to go down.
No, 100% agree. Yeah, having that ability to know what you want to do really helps with purpose and drive and knowing where you want to go next. So yeah, that I 100% agree.
And when you work with, the young people that you're with, do you often see that, or work with them and understand that they have that lack of maybe that drive or that ambition, but also that lack of purpose at times, whereby they don't know exactly where they want to go with it, and then it's down to you to support, shape, or facilitate that whilst working with them?
100%. We have like one-to-ones and it's like they want to do something but they're still figuring it out. And I feel like 15, 16, or whatever age it is, I still feel like that's really young for you to decide what you things change. Um, but yeah, no, I definitely it does come across with some young people, but a lot of young people are quite now quite like quite outspoken and
Mm.
have a bit of an inkling of what they want to do. If not, there's that solid, education's always going to be there as well.
I think that's interesting in terms of young people don't always want to know what they want to do, and it's a very young age for them to sort of be preparing. Because obviously, I work with a lot of young people every day, and when you say, "Oh, what do you want to do in the future?" or life is going to be X, Y, and Z, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to look like for that for them. And it's also a case of whereby they're going, "Actually, I got this idea of what I'd like to do here." So it
Yeah.
sort of gives you that buy-in whereby you can go, "Actually, you can utilize this for that," and that's a good opportunity to do that. And a lot of the kids that I work with tend to look towards more skills based jobs now rather than,
It's true.
jobs in academic or operational sides in terms of a lot of the kids that I've moved into that I'm working with, for example.
Yeah, this I think because with some jobs that are skills based, like if you look at trades and building and constructions, I guess there's always going to be work. So
Mhm.
it's a solid one to fall back on. So it is understandable, and there is quite a few apprenticeships down that avenue as well.
And
So
I think it's interesting as well because obviously, when you look at trends for the future, for the young people that are ahead of them, how different is education going to look now in 10 years? Obviously, we're touching upon, use of AI and how the scope in education is going to look a little bit different, but then also how that skills based in terms of that comprehension of AI, and then looking away from technology, for example, if they've got more skills, they might be more employable or have further opportunity to shape the landscape a little bit differently, whereby it isn't that 9 to 5 job. It isn't you go to school, then you go to uni, and then you get a job. And because a lot of the kids that I work with are like, sir, I don't want to live that life. I don't want to be working
yeah.
9 to 5. And I'm like, I love that attitude. I love that ambition.
No, 100%. I think I'm glad they do have that. It's just being equipped in whatever you want to do moving forward to not be able to do that. But yeah, I understand. I do get it.
I think it's good though because a lot of education is like you go to school, you get your qualifications, right? Uni, boom, into a job, boom, and that
Yeah,
gives you a lot of systematic views. And sometimes I find it difficult working in education because as much as I understand systems and I like a little bit of system, a
yeah,
lot of the kids that I work with, I'm like, I want to break that system, change it, change the cycle. Like life doesn't have to be like that. Like I want to enable you to go off and do whatever you want. So if you want to go traveling and go around the world and pick up jobs and money here and there. You spend like 5 years doing that. You spent 5 years gaining your world experience and life experience, and then you come back and you might then go, right, I'm going to settle down now, or I want to get into this trade and profession. But you've actually enjoyed life in the meantime, whereby some people go straight into a job and they don't actually see that type of life, and they're like, oh, when's the last time you went on holiday? They're like, 5 years ago or whatever. But for them, that could be such an eye opener and such a change in landscape in terms of, do you know what? I actually never considered doing that before, or I never had that opportunity presented to me because of X, Y, and Z. So when it comes to youth work and education, some people see that as two very different fields, but I combine that a lot in terms of the job that I do. And I think it's, fascinating when working with young people in terms of how their mind looks and trying to differentiate what the future might look like in terms of what's presented to them and those optics that come into play at times.
yeah. University is not for everyone. The system is not for everyone, and like you see a lot of great entrepreneurs and um, footballers and sports people and great people who have managed to achieve, but they haven't gone down the whole academic route. Like I said, academics is not for everyone, and practical based skills and practical based avenues are a really good way to get young people engaged in the community, whether that's through careers, whether that's through volunteering, whether that's through campaigns, education, whatever it is. I feel like there's a lot of things out there for young people now. There's a lot of options, so it's good to see. Yeah.
I'm 100% with you there. And I know when I was speaking to a uni lecturer last week, I was talking to her about the basis of, successful people, what we might brand as them, for example. And when you look at it, they don't go to school, go to uni, work for like 10 years, and then they have a big business that takes off. They've done it through hard work, grit, that understanding of going in and getting, experience within the field. They've really pushed themselves. They might have broke the mold a little bit. And
Yeah.
I'm all for that. And you might see that with kids, especially in the youth work setting, whereby they might have, tough backgrounds or broken relationships or traumatic experiences. That might actually spur them on to actually go off and do something because they've had that traumatic experience. It's actually made them a lot stronger in how they deal with people at times, or how they might be presented in situations. Go, do you know what? Actually, that's not as bad of a situation as what I've experienced, for example. So sometimes that can really project them, and I'm all for young people utilizing a position to, overcome the barriers which they've had, but to try and utilize it in a way that's a positive outcome for them.
No, 100%. And I feel like that's what we're somewhat there for, to support the young people and help them in whichever direction they would like to go in.
Absolutely. So, as a youth manager yourself, you've got quite a
Yeah.
wide scope, and it's really interesting in terms of what you do at the Lincoln City Foundation, because I worked at Cardiff City Foundation for for a period of time. So I understand what it's like
Yeah.
combining working for a football club and utilizing the appeal of the club, what it's like to use the brand image to try and project those relationships, and how to get into partners, set up in schools, go out into educational settings,
Yeah.
and how to set yourself up in the community, etc. So when it's combining sport and youth work, that can be a little bit difficult at times, but it can also be very enjoyable, because sometimes you go into a setting, and I've had this experience whereby you're going, right, oh, Cardiff City are in, we're here to do football, and you're actually then presenting something else, and you're like, it's not so much to do with football, it's actually more to do with the educational side because of this type of program, because we're utilizing the foundation to do this. So it's a
Mhm.
great opportunity to try and combine both and utilize the position of Lincoln City in terms of how you work with young people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like it's great being attached to a football club, because I feel like the football club is like a big staple of Lincoln. So when we do come in, the football fans, the people who know about Lincoln City are really engaged. I feel like as well, it yeah, can be amazing, because you get that instant engagement, but not all young people are sports young people. So that's where you have to be able to adapt sessions, adapt skills, and go in with the objective that you're going to attack all criteria and all young people that want to engage in, let's say, employability, for example, or multi-sport sessions. You've got to have a wide variety that covers the whole scope, to be able to engage all learners.
And I think that's sort of where my thinking is, because behind the podcast, people might be going, oh, actually, you spoke about education, you spoke about technology, you spoke about work. And it's like, what does this have to do with coaching? Well, actually, if you've got a grassroots, football club, for example, you're actually
Yeah.
bridging all these different kind of skills. Because if you've got, a set standard where kids are coming in, and you have to, maybe address the way that they talk to people, especially the coaches, and how they're welcoming and understand and respond to situations, you're already developing skills which can be transferred to employability, for example, or you can utilize the grassroots club to go, right, actually, you're coming on as a coach, you're going to gain some work experience or volunteer experience, and therefore you've actually built up a little bit of your CV because of the opportunity whereby you're transferring from a player to maybe a young person. Now you might have that outlook towards the future and what your career might look like, or you might have some ideas behind it. So when it comes to looking at transferring what, you're a professional football club, and some people going, oh, well, actually, we're just a grassroots foundation. Well, actually, there's a lot which you can take away from the great work which you're doing into what they're doing in terms of an establishment and an organization whereby they can support young people, especially from an athletic background. So I think when it comes to, foundations and football clubs, I love that sort of scope in terms of utilizing sport as a tool to support young people through youth work.
Yeah, no, we do a lot of things that aren't sport related, like NCS, empowered, attendance for attendance. Like we have a lot of programs that do utilize the education side, the academic side, which is amazing. And yeah, yeah, like you said, as a youth manager or as somebody who works at a foundation, you end up wearing multiple hats, especially when you're working with young people, especially when you're in, the education and the sports sector. It's, you are a coach at one point, you are delivering, purely football sessions, you are delivering multi-sport sessions, you're delivering sessions about CVs, mental health, employability. Like the scope is so large,
Mhm.
And I think it's great that there's a massive variety, and that people can see, and especially young people can see, that we're there to support them and help them futuristically, and that it's not a temporal measure that we have. Like, for example, although it's a sports thing, we do, PL kicks. We have PL kicks on the Saturday and the Friday, but I think it's more than just having a safe environment and letting those young people come and play sports. It's the friendships, it's the bonds, it's the informal communication. You could be their role model. You could be that pivotal person in that life that helps them make a great decision, or pushes them and encourages them to do better. Or some young people, might not have that role model. So yeah, being a pivotal person, and helping them as much as you can, and helping them with their personal development is amazing.
I think that's important as well, because you might have, kid A from one estate, and then you might have kid B from another estate, and the only interaction that they might have in that relationship is by actually attending a foundation session, whereby, oh, I actually saw Joey last week, and oh, I can't wait to see him again next week. So they end up building that relationship through a connection, through a shared interest, and once they can take that away further into their community, or they might build up a relationship away from the foundation, I think that's
Yeah,
such a successful outcome within itself. And it's difficult because a lot of, in our positions, we get judged on KPIs. We might be asked what the impacts are, etc.
yeah.
And they're the sort of impacts which you can't sort of put on paper, because you're not actually tracking relationships and friendships. But actually, that's a huge impact in terms of the one or two young people that you might have in terms of that relationship, and what they might actually take away from it.
No, absolutely. And a lot of people do, and it's amazing to see that they grow in themselves and who they are and who they interact with. And in addition to that, like workshops, bringing people down, making that connection. We actually work right near a police station, and the police do get involved as well, which is also really good, because some people from certain backgrounds have negative ideals on the police, and when that happens and they integrate, it's just amazing for the community, and it like restores trust that the young people may have lost in the police as well.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. And again, that's where the importance of optics and perspective comes into play as well. And in that similar sort of background, when I worked for Cardiff, we had sort of some funding from the local authority, and part of it was to improve attainment in young people within the community, whereby they could access school into an after-school club, and Cardiff City were going to go in and deliver that. And the point was to help with homework and to improve attainment. Now, when we sold that to young people in schools, they were like, "No, I'm not going to that. Why would I want to do homework in the community, etc." But then we had to sort of play it right. We're going to try and help you with a bit of education, and you're welcome to do your homework. But we're actually going to base this now. We're going to get some sport in, and then we're going to try and flip it, whereby we can build up the attainment, and then get some skills, and then get them into volunteering, etc. So we
Amazing.
had to overcome a sort of barrier, because it's that position whereby they could see something and they're like, oh, I don't want to engage in that, or I don't like the sound of that. But actually, if you flip it in that perspective, they're actually going to enjoy it once they come in through just that shared interest and that buy-in that you can generate, whereby they'll then attend the session, and then you can build on it from there.
Yeah, like we have our empowered program, and half of that is about SEL, and the second half is multi sports. And I guess a lot of the young people love the multi sports, and then they really do like the second half, which is understanding about conflict management, perseverance, confidence, and I guess emotional intelligence that they didn't understand, or what they weren't as strong as or aware, but they didn't know how to capitalize on it, or they didn't know how to control it. They were able to get both flips of the coin. And yeah, no, sports is a great hook for a lot of young people. I definitely agree.
And I think it's those skills which are important, as you say there, because very much in education, a lot of these skills aren't taught, but they're expected in young people, or you might touch upon them within a PSE session, or a bit of a form tutor pastoral time. And that
Yeah.
time might be very limited. And therefore, when a kid, or young person actually acts with away from the parameters that are expected in education, then therefore they can be sanctioned for it, because of the way they've
Yeah.
reacted or responded. And that's sometimes a very unfair situation, because they don't actually understand what conflict management is, or don't understand their emotional regulation or response to that. And therefore,
Mm,
when they're sanctioned for it, sometimes there is justification for it. But again, wearing those many hats like you, it's very difficult to position yourself on, right, this is A, and now B has happened, so you have to have the outcome of C's, where it's not
yeah.
always like that. So that perspective is very important. important. But when it comes into, the skills of youth work and what we might develop in young people, I think that's very important to consider, especially if you're working with them or going to do the session for the first time. And you might go in with non-negotiables, values, or expectations, and you might see young people going against that. And then sometimes that's very difficult for you as a lead practice sort of facilitate,
Yeah.
allow, or see, because it's going against what you might uphold or expect.
Yeah, so for me, when I go into sessions with young people that I've never engaged with before, or attend certain campaigns or with young people, um, for me, I'm not their teacher, I'm not their parent, but there's things you have to teach them, and then there's parental qualities that you need to evoke in them. So for me, a non-negotiable, although I don't say out loud, I don't have a list where, oh, this is what I expect. This is, I expect you to respect me. I think developing the relationships with the young people and understanding you're aware of their surroundings, so like things as small as mannerisms, vocabulary, they're all important things for a young person to feel comfortable in your space. I just think if you go in with a set list, it automatically gives teach vibes, regulations, restrictions. So to be able to create that environment where those young people, no matter what they've done, feel comfortable, like they can come and speak to you, feel like they can respect you, feel like they can get behind you, I think for me is the first aim. Then it is to sit there and give them content. So just developing that relationship, trying to understand who they are and what they need from me, is definitely the staple of any environment in terms of young people where I go first.
And I really like that, because instead of going in with set expectations or listing them, you're sort of allowing them to project into themselves and then understand what the expectations in a framework whereby you're not delivering that in an explicit way, but then you're developing that relationship over time where then you can instill the expectations through that mutual respect and outcome, which is what
Yeah.
I try to do with the young people that I work with. And obviously when you work in an education setting, it's very difficult to move away from expectations or
Yeah.
frameworks, because they're
Yeah.
very much sort of restricted and put on you in terms of the expectations within that sort of environment. But when it comes into my own classroom or own environment, what I'd like to see from the young people is, right, these are the sort of profiling that we'd like to see when you're in here. So we'd like to see you be polite. We'd like to see you try and be this. So they're more of what we'd like to see over a period of time. And sometimes, what we're trying to work towards that improvement. So we might understand if you come in unregulated, or we might understand if you're not in the best frame of mind to respond to a situation, or you're not
Yeah.
willing or ready to work, but we can build up towards that. So as long as we've
100%.
got a bit of kindness in there and a bit of mutual respect, the work can come a little bit later on. So they're a bit more sort of a framework that is through mutual respect, whereby a lot of the kids that come in, we sort of get the best end of them, because they're in a position where they're like, oh, I actually like going in with Sir, or I have that respect for Sir. And I get to see the better side of them because they're willing to work because of that relationship that we've built. So again, it's overcoming those little barriers, and that relationship is absolutely key, rather than expectations, standards, values, and what you might go, right, this is X, Y, and Z. You have to do this before we get to this. I think building that relationship and then going, right, now we need to achieve Y,
Yeah.
now we need to achieve X, is actually more beneficial.
And I feel like they're more likely to engage with you as a human being and respect you as a person if they know what you're about and that you care about them. Because I feel like as a teacher, the main aim of the teacher is to make sure they pass the exams, they get the content. And I guess, unfortunately, at times, I believe the care somewhat comes secondary at times, unless it affects the bigger picture. So I guess if you come in looking massively uniformed as a teacher or as someone regulatory, for the young people who don't have that at home or don't have that in a general sense, they're gonna find it very hard to take to you. I feel like going into a place and demanding all these things from young people who don't know you can really backfire. So that's just not something I do. A non-negotiable for me though is swearing. It doesn't happen in my sessions. They do get pulled for it. And I think it's swear, and a lot of people just think, oh well, I can swear and I'm out when I'm not with you, when I'm not around you. That's total. You know what? That's your decision. But I just feel like in the future, the workspace setting, the way you're going to develop, swearing is not applicable and it's not allowed. So it's more of a long-term overview than it is a temporal thing. And I feel like with a lot of young people, things are not explained to them why they're in trouble, or why there's issues. And from that, they can be seen as disruptive, they can be seen as an issue. However, if someone just basically said to them, like, what you did was wrong and this is why, the this is why bit, I feel like with a lot of young people seems to be missing. A lot of people think, or a lot of superiors or seniors or staff or whatnot think, oh, they're playing up. Okay, that's fine, but why are they playing up? I think the why is the follow through that's not always established, and then it's not always addressed. And then that can just lead to further repercussions of the young person, I suppose. Especially for me in the education background, I feel like that can happen. But with me and my approach, I like to say, okay, well, you said this, and this is why it's an issue. Moving forward, refrain from saying that, please. And then they understand. And then, because I remember I've had so many kids been like, oh well, I didn't know that's what that meant, or I didn't understand that was bad. Or because there's also the element of cultural diversity, there's also the element of mannerisms, there's also the element of what might be okay in someone's household is not okay in a different person's household from a different background. So it's having that general grace, giving them grace first, and then from there, you know maneuvering.
And I think that's important because you might have a young person accessing a session, and they might be from a cultural background whereby they might be dressed in a certain way, or they might have certain apparel on because of some religious belief, etc. But then a
Yeah,
coach or a youth worker or a facilitator might go, actually, you can't wear that because it goes against what the guidelines or expectations are. You must be in your training kit, for example, and we want to see you in training kit without X, Y, and Z on. But actually,
yeah,
they're wearing that because of a cultural or religious belief, and therefore if you're going to say that straight away, they might not access your session again, and therefore you've lost
yeah.
investment and that
That's so
engagement, and you
true.
might take them off sport altogether. So
Absolutely.
whereby allow them to come into the session, and then maybe they might approach you over a couple of weeks' time and go, "Do you know what, actually, Michelle, I wear this because of this," and therefore you've already got that understanding of that young person, and then
Yeah.
therefore it sometimes creates difficulty because another young person goes, "Well, actually, why is Kate out
Yeah.
there doing so?"
Yeah.
And that's where the real skill of a youth worker and practitioners come into play.
But one shoe doesn't fit all, and then allowing them to establish one shoe doesn't fit all is, I guess, is the biggest skill I feel like a youth worker can have. And I also feel like the understanding of ethnic, religious, and all the differences, all the differences that can a young person can engage with. Just being equipped on that, whether that's racism, whether that's age, no matter what it is. I feel like youth workers should be up to date with it. Therefore, they're able to attack it as best they can.
Yeah.
um because yeah, like you said, there could be so many differences in a group, so many like diverse young people, so being able to cater to all their needs is very important, and how you do that is also really important as well.
Absolutely, and I think I was having a conversation the other day with a head teacher and a very experienced background, and he's doing some consultation. So I was having a conversation with him, and typically when you speak to a senior leader or head teacher, they always talk about what their expectations and outcomes have been, and what you might see within a school or within an education environment, the expectation.
Yeah,
But he was saying the other day how important it is for a young person to maybe be in a lesson, and they might have their coat on, but automatically, you might see teachers going, right, no, you're not coming into this classroom because you got your coat on, and therefore I'm sending you straight out. And then that you're putting a bridge up and a barrier before the young person's even entered the classroom, and therefore they might
yeah,
disengage, walk off, truant, etc. And he's like, well, actually, the important thing was for them to come into the classroom, sit there, and maybe start learning. And it is difficult then because you touch upon that base of that one shoe doesn't fit all, for example, because other students might be looking, well, they got their coat on, why aren't I allowed? But he's like, actually, get them into the lesson, start them off on a task, allow them to settle, and then in a few minutes you might be able to approach them and go, actually, do you mind taking your coat off? Because you've got that bit of rapport. You've gone, oh, actually, do
yeah,
you know what? Sir's allowed me in this classroom. Sir's been respectful. Sir's been all right. I'm actually going to be okay for him. So, it's
yeah.
about building those bridges, and it might take 3 or 4 lessons for the jacket to come off. But if you start to get them into your classroom or your environment or your setting, you're actually then you have that little bit of buy-in, you have that foundation whereby you can start to broach other areas of that relationship because of that respect which has been built.
100%. And yeah, like I say, for me, young people, the best thing you can do is create that relationship with them, create that safe environment, that safe space where they feel you're approachable. you know. And then also try and yourself be equipped on, oh, let me learn a bit about Christianity, let me learn a bit about this ethnic background, just so you're equipped and you're not ignorant as well. Because I feel like ignorance can be a massive barrier for young people. You know, say for instance, you know, there's someone of Southeast Asian heritage in your group, and then you've got someone of, let's say, you know, West African heritage in your group, you know, and you say something that is very outlandish, and you know that can affect either of them. Trying to maneuver from there is so difficult, because now they think, you know, you're prejudiced, and from there it's difficult. But however, if you're equipped on, you know, even if it's to the bare minimum, you're equipped on these cultures, you're able to, one, develop these relationships with them, and two, they think, oh, okay, that person's actually all right. So, and then I think as well, like with sessions and with like teaching or delivering or whatever it may be, a lot of the young people, if they buy into you, they buy into the situation, they buy into the session. You know, you're somewhat there to make sure they have a good time, to make sure they understand what you're selling them, and you know they feel valued as well, and you care about their next steps. So yeah.
I think that's very important as well in terms of just understanding the young people, their background, maybe doing a little bit of research in terms of, you know, their religion, or maybe areas which might come up and there's a contemporary issue, or maybe something which is being discussed. So, you know, for example, a lot of the young people which I work with, you know, they're expected to do their schemes of work, their curriculum, and then
Yeah.
little things come up in that sort of conversation, such as, you know, the Ukraine-Russia war, etc. And they're like, well, actually, then a conversation starts branching out in terms of their different values and ethics, and therefore
Yeah.
they might actually, oh, I dislike this group or I dislike that. And it creates a great field then, because then you're able to have an educational conversation, that understanding. You're able to talk about that why factor, which you sort of touched upon earlier. And it's great because then you start to bridge in that reflection, you bridge in the skills which you talked about earlier. You get to build upon that relationship, and so many elements come into play just through one conversation or one topic which is just cropped up.
No, absolutely. I think I've also had those sessions like for sure ideas, like NCS sessions with some of the young people, and I've had like immigration, migration, racism, bullying, abuse, homophobia. Like, you know, it branches out, and then they all put it down, and you know, you let them, you create an environment where they can speak openly. They're not going to be judged, and then you can address that, and then you can start to break down. This is why, you know, so and so may have migrated due to war. You know, some things that people end up doing on the life unfolds the way it does is not by their own choices. So, you know, it's appreciating that, appreciating those values. And you don't necessarily have to agree with it, you don't, but definitely time and place, and then your approach is very important as well. And just reiterating that as well is also very important.
100%, because a little bit of that comes into play whereby you combine in coaching within that. And I'm not talking about actual football coaching, but coaching skills where you're actually facilitating a conversation. You're asking the right kinds of questions whereby you can have that conversation. You can sort of coach them into ways of thinking and not a way of agreeing. And I think that's a very important thing, because very much as facilitators, we might go, actually, this is my value, this is my foundation, this is what we might perceive to be the correct answer. Well, actually, this young person has a very different view. And if we had all young people or every person thinking in the same mindset in the same way, we'd never have creative thinkers, or we might not have, you know, successful people, because those successful people have thought outside the box or broke the system, and therefore they're thinking in a very different way. So I'm very much on, let's enable, you know, systems to allow the support of creative thinking and creative masterclasses, because a lot of the expectations is, right, you do this, you do that, you follow, you conform. How many creative people have conformed and done different things? Yes, we have to have
Yeah.
that in terms of certain foundations, as you said, you know, that not having those elements of swearing and that expectation, that mutual respect, etc. But that creativity, we don't want to strip it from young people, and enabling them to have that creative skills and opportunity to do so, I think, is very important.
No, 100%. And that's why we have to all look at different vices. Like, I feel like the youth clubs that used to be around frequently, I can't really think of like many youth clubs or any youth clubs that still exist, which is crazy to me, because that's where I met all, you know, people from different backgrounds, learn about them, you know, in such an open access environment, in such an open way. Then you had your youth workers, you had your social workers, you had people who were there to help you. You know, you had your role models, you had all these pivotal people and all these pivotal things. And I feel like that's such a massive massive hub and place for young people. And COVID has really took a hit on a lot of young people, like mentally, and just being able to socialize with peers, understand peers. Youth clubs had music, they had arts, they had sports outside, sports inside, they had a bit of cooking. They literally had most of the things that young people are interested in, most of the things that people cover. And for that to not exist right now, um I think it's a bit of a shame. But I'm glad that CCOs have picked up programs that can help young people. The Premier League, like Premier League Kicks, and NCS, is still good programs that are around to help young people.
And I think that's very important now as well, because when you talk about sports clubs in those settings, you might not see, as many youth clubs as there once was, or youth clubs on this week, and branching out in terms of that, because funding's been cut, and many different
Yeah,
outlets towards that, and the provisions have been slimmed right down. So you might see a youth provision operate, on a 2-hour basis of every other day in half term, for example, as a way of utilizing some funding, but not actually delivering enough for these young people in those communities. So when it comes to those different sports clubs, and especially grassroots foundations, you might have some coaches which see that as a sports club and for kids to go and win and to be successful and to progress into maybe an academy setting. Well, actually, for that young child, it's actually a youth club for them, because they're actually getting to see
yeah,
their going to do a bit of football. And then when it comes to social events such as Christmas, or there might be a Halloween party, or there might be presentation, they get to have some food, and they might get to have some, they get to see some of the adults and the volunteers and the coaches. And for them, that's more of a youth setting, and that different outlook in terms of how important that is for them. And they might go, Joe, actually, I don't want to play football for a living. I just enjoy playing because my mate goes. And that's sort of the outlook which I had. So a lot of, a couple of the kids that I coach every now and then are like, oh, why don't you play anymore? I'm like, I don't enjoy playing. Like, I enjoyed playing when I was a kid. My mates played.
yeah.
I don't want to go and train and do all fitness workout. I say I just enjoy playing with my mates back in the day, and like in the school, you get to look forward to the weekend, and you're chatting with your mates, and then you get to play on the yard and stuff, and then you get the football club. And I said that's the element which I enjoyed. So for me, it was a youth setting which I really enjoyed, because I was with my friends more than anything.
Yeah.
And shame that it went away over some years in terms of how it fell apart, but it's that different ideology for kids in terms of the importance of what just a grassroots club might be for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think grassroots club, arts activities, and I think the main thing, what I found, like especially developing in this role, is funding. It just a lot of it comes down to funding, being able to sustain it for a long period of time due to funding. Um, I just feel like if there was more of an investment into, young youth programs, young people, um, then we could help so many more young people across Lincolnshire, and across the country, to be quite honest. But yeah, no, it is. I would say it's definitely a shame that youth clubs are not a formal thing anymore. Funding's been cut, but I'd definitely say CCOs are definitely doing their thing, and they're helping so many people across Lincoln, like RCCO, YMCA. Um, there's so many great organizations that are really helping young people across the country, send young people, migrants. So many young people are being helped, and yeah, it's really great to see, honestly.
I think you touched upon it there, because, for example, YMCA were huge back in the day. Everyone sort of knew who they were, and they had a huge apparel. They had buildings, or they might have settings, and you don't see
Yeah,
so many YMCA buildings anymore. And it's very, they've slimmed right down in terms of a program compared to where it was many years ago. But for in terms of touching upon this for anyone listening, and what they might take away is, well, actually, oh, do I look at my local football club and see what they might offer? And you might actually do some research and go, actually, I never knew they offered an over 60s walking football club, for example. And
yeah.
that might,
Walking football, we have that.
and that's what I mean. So many different things which you might not realize your club and your foundation might offer, whereby you
Yeah.
go, well, actually, all that's gone. Well, actually, no, Lincoln Football Club are delivering that, or Chelsea Football Club, etc. So I think it's just doing a little bit of research, a little bit of signposting. You might actually realize there's a lot more out there than there is.
No, 100%. I think it's an amazing being a part of the football club, because you get that look, you get that engagement. However, I think what can be a bit difficult to maneuver is that we are a part of the football club. So people just think, everything that we do is football related. But yeah, no, we have amazing programs like ESOL programs. We have, so many youth programs, half empowered, NCS. We have, multiplying prisons. We work with such a vast and a big range of people. That yeah, that is so true. If anyone who is listening can go to their football club, local football club, and I'm sure they do a lot more than just the first men's team who play on the stadium pitch, or there's so much to get involved with, especially in the community through your football club.
I think that's important as well. Again, that
Mm.
perspective element, because you might go, actually, do you want to go up to like Lincoln Football Club today? And someone else might go, what do I want to go to a football club for? Well, actually, they're doing this type of program, and it's not just a football club. They're actually facilitating this session, and they go to that session like, oh, do you know what? It's actually not just football. It's not what I realized. And they might go to the stadium, or they might go to a second and go, well, actually, this is incredible. I never knew this existed within my community. I think that's so important, because when I worked for Cardiff City, Cardiff's a very big geographical area, and you might
Yeah.
go across one side of Cardiff and you chat to a lot of the young people, and they go, oh yeah, I went to the match so and so, I've been to the stadium, I've done that, I've done this. Then I went to the other side of Cardiff, and that side of Cardiff is closer to the stadium than the original side. And the amount of kids which I spoke to are going, have you ever been to the stadium? And the answer was no. I was shocked, and I think that's
Yeah.
huge in itself. Just how many expectations on young people to have explored or to have been engaged in something, and therefore they've never actually experienced it. And it's quite eye opening when you have these questions and you chat to these young people.
Yeah, no, but I think my main thing with the young people has been when I go into schools and then I speak to them, I'm like, do you know what, we do? And they're like, yeah, football. So it's like allowing them to understand a wider narrative that we're not just football, that it's not just a football club. We do, so many youth things, we do green leaders, and there's like real roots of employment with us, volunteering and then figuring out what avenue, is for you, whether it's coaching, whether it's youth, whether it's maintenance, whether it's, marketing, managing, like we're really here to try and facilitate what's for you, and then from there looking at part-time work, and then eventually looking up to do full-time work. Like with our NTS program right now, we're trying to get all our young people just to see if you know volunteering with us or seeing what we do is anything that they'd like to engage with in the future. Just showing them the option, is amazing. So no, absolutely, I agree. Yeah.
I think just by engaging, you can actually open up doors which we never actually knew existed. So when you take young people, we've had discussions with them and gone, oh, do you actually, you could be, you might be involved in a foundation as a community coach, or you could be a coach driver, or you could be a kit person, or you could be, the stadium announcer. And the amount of young people which you speak to and go, do you know what? I actually never thought you could do that. I thought it was just,
100%.
being a professional footballer and being a manager. And it's like, actually, there's hundreds of roles in a football club in terms of what might actually exist. And the football club might enable you to do X, Y, and Z, or you might just do a bit of Premier League kicks volunteering, or you might just go along to some sessions and gain some experience in terms of some coaching elements. So I think there's a lot more which can be offered for you. And when it comes to that youth work element, do you think it's more important now than ever than it was before to have youth work?
Oh, I'm not too sure because I feel yeah, I'm gonna say yeah, just due to resource. I feel like there was more resource post the time that the pre the time it was now. Because I remember being a youth and there being so much there being, you could go on the NCS residential, the 4 week residential, you could go on the autumn wave. So you'd have NCS all throughout the autumn. You could do PGL at school, you could have all these great trips and so many more opportunities. And I just feel like now, post COVID, post funding, it's a bit different. Even like the format and the model of NCS is different now. But yeah, no, even the youth, like I said, the youth clubs unfortunately are not there anymore. But I definitely say now's the best time, or would be the best time, and I think it's always a great time to support and help young people as best we can through literally through as much as we can with our resources to help them.
Yeah, again, you spoke about it earlier, but I think COVID is still a huge impact in terms of what I see with my young people every day, and the sort of the expectations on them. They're still have certain outcomes, or whereby they're still affected in terms of their attainment, their understanding, their outcomes, because
Yeah.
they actually miss so much in terms of learning. And when I've sort of gone from one setting to another in terms of education, one of the settings that I was previously in was kids had to have bags, they would take their books home, they still have a lot of the expectations of when I was a kid. Whereas now I'm in a new sort of setting, a lot of the kids don't carry bags, they don't take their books home. And I'm
Yeah.
like, whoa, that is so mad. And the homework which is given out is very little compared to my last score. So when it comes into those little things, I think COVID is still having an impact in terms of our environment and the setting that we have with the young people. And they're still experiencing little things like that, which is still, they're losing, they've lost a lot of skills, whereby the organization, that independence, that initiative, that problem solving, because they've actually been impacted, and we're still seeing the impacts of that now. And I feel when people just write it off, I think it is still a contemporary issue for us to play catch up on for another few
Yeah.
years, until we actually enable these young people in terms of whereby they then become adults themselves. They're going to be in a position where they can overcome that a little bit more, because they've grown, they've explored, they've had those experiences which has enabled them. And therefore, once we've sort of moved up every age group, you've sort of phased out COVID in terms of that impact in terms of young people that will no longer exist in that element. But another contemporary issue might project itself within that time. So I think it's really important when it comes to young people to consider that issues will still affect them, and they don't just go, right, here's an issue, we're going to explore 6 months of it, and then it's going to go away. They actually sit there with a young person for quite a long period of time.
Yeah. I think in terms of in terms of a response to COVID, I think a long-term action plan for each young person. I know it's going to be hard to be viable, but especially in the school setting, the regular check-ins and where we want to take these young people, really drive that narrative. I think all of that comes back, the poor organization, or that's how problem solving. It comes back down to mental health issues. I think it comes down to technology, because through COVID all we really had was technology. So and your hour walks and whatnot, but I believe that's really impacted them. I just feel like they need more support than ever, which is also true, but I feel like COVID has somewhat been a blocking point for a lot of young people to integrate and develop those skills, those social skills. So it's been very difficult. However, it could also be a mental health thing, because I feel like a lot of young people did come back and they didn't feel like they wanted to be there. They did feel depressed because they were stuck in their house for the best part of 2 years. So yeah, definitely difficult, a whole difficult situation to maneuver COVID.
I completely agree with you, and there's some important considerations there, which are still key. And when it comes into that, do you use any specific strategies or models when it comes to the youth work settings that you deliver in
I think
terms of engaging young people?
engaging young people, I think it's dependent on the age group, because it's such a variety. So I'll say I work from anything from 8 to 18, because it's such a variety. You have to adopt those approaches and those strategies. With the young people, you have to give them that grace. Well, the older young people, you have to give them that grace. With the younger kids, it's more of an energetic approach for me. And it's more them knowing that we care, and like we do have a lot of love for them. With the older lot, it's also known that they can also support us. We can be a support for them. I think my approach is quite an energetic approach. I wouldn't say I have a specific strategy. I would say as long as they enjoyed the session, they felt comfortable. I always have a reflection at the end. So at the start, I have, let's say, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. So the young people engage. I'll go through it. At the end, I'll have a reflection. What went well? What would you change? What do you like? And I give all young people that option to voice their opinion. Because, say, for instance, I'm doing blind football or walking football and they absolutely hate it. And I'm doing it every week, every week, every week. And I'm not getting no productive feedback. No one's speaking up. They're not going to want to come. The engagement's going to dip off. The participation's going to dip off. They need to be heard, as small as it is. Um, and I think for me, if I see there's someone who's quite rowdy, or there's someone who likes to take lead, I will let the young person lead. um of course, like with my supervision. But say for instance we have a football game and they've got a lot to say, I'll make them referee, and I'll ensure that they're making fair calls. And then before you know it, that young person is no longer as disruptive as they were before, or not, because you've given them that level of responsibility. So I think it's just being very careful about the young people you have. And I think it's being also aware of your intent of what you're trying to do with them and what you're trying to achieve with them, and then also giving them the opportunity to voice their concerns, and then they can do that through a safe space, because also if they feel you're not approachable, yet again that's that issue. It comes back to that issue. They're not going to give you honest feedback, they're not going to tell you the truth. So yeah, creating that environment is very important as well.
I love that outlook in terms of that feedback that you do with them, understanding the why, what they could be improvements upon, how they might want to see this future sessions, because you might deliver the same session
Yeah.
week in, week out, as you say, and suddenly participation starts to drop off, or the engagement isn't as energetic as you've had. And therefore, you start to ask the questions, well, actually, why hasn't the young people sort of come back? And they haven't come back because you've done that session 6 weeks on the bounce. They've sort of had enough of that session, and you've
Yeah.
exhausted the excitement of that session. So, I completely see that, because I work for two local authorities, and one local authority we done like a play scheme and a play club sort of program, and when a lot of it was typically, your arts, your crafts, you might have a bit of
Yeah.
free play, and then a lot of participation dropped off, and it was very very low, and they started to close off a lot of their clubs and save on funding and combine others, etc. And now that sort of provision is very very minimal in terms of what's delivered in that local authority. Whereas when I went and worked for another local authority in that play provision, it was a combination of youth and play work, and therefore the big boss was investing in Nintendo Wii's and Xbox Ones, etc. He was like, right, I know it's a play
Money.
provision, but let's adapt it. Let's get kids in, because suddenly they're seeing all right Wii's, and then they got Xbox Ones, and they're coming in. And we've increased participation. We've got kids off the street. We're accessing other
Amazing.
provisions, and therefore you can start to go, actually, oh, they're playing football over there, and then you start to build in those play elements, and the provision is bigger than it's ever been. Whereas on the other local authority, that provision no longer exists. And I think that they were always very true to their testament. This is a play provision. Kids come here to play. They are going to do the traditional play activities. We don't want to involve technology. We want to get kids away from that. And in two very different outlooks, and two very strong valued outlooks as well. But
Yeah.
one adapted, one didn't adapt, and therefore the one that didn't adapt ended up dying away, and was a big shame to see as a former member of staff, because I actually really enjoyed working on it as a member of staff, and I know
Yeah.
what the impact has had on that community. But I think just adapting your sessions and getting little things in whereby the young people are going to engage, and therefore you can overcome barriers, and you're able to adapt, and like you've done in terms of, all right, we're actually going to do this week, and we're going to do that next week. All right, they didn't enjoy that session this week, they might enjoy that. Well, actually, that hasn't worked. This is working, and we might do this now for the next 3 or 4 weeks. So there is nothing wrong with adapting, and you've got, sometimes you might have a framework in terms of, right, I want all my youth sessions to look like this for the next 2 months. Well, not necessarily, that framework might not work for everyone, or your staff, for example.
I think yeah, you have to definitely change with the times. That person who bought all that the technology must have sufficient funds, but
Mm.
not everyone does, and I guess that's where the hiccup can be. I definitely say moving with the times, but then having that great mixture of it being hands on in addition to it being sit down. So I think the combination of the both really works well. Yeah, being adaptable absolutely is where it's at. Um, Sorry, what else did you say? Sorry.
I think it was just that adaptability, and I sort of that position. And as we sort of continue to chat about that, I think it's that little sustainability element, because,
Yeah,
and as you said earlier on, is that funding can be difficult to maintain and sustain for a long period of time. But if you look at like a grassroots organization, a lot of sustainability comes up quite often, because expenses are going up and hiring of pitches, etc. But there's
yeah, for
actually a
sure.
lot of sustainability which you can bring into play, but you can actually utilize a lot of partnerships. You can utilize what's in the local facility. So you might just put on a futsal session, or you might go and visit a stadium, or you might have a day down the beach whereby you hire a big bus and you just charge £5. You might, facilitate a club in terms of subsidizing the other half of the fee example. There are little ways around it, but I think as a club, as an organization, you're at a perfect position whereby you can utilize what's around you to really deliver a fantastic provision whereby it isn't too costly. And yes, it is difficult to maintain those costs, but I think it is sustainable, it is adaptable, it can be done in terms of what you deliver.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we do that well with the level and the range of sports equipment we have. We have our football development as well. We have so many sport walking football. I think there's blind football as well. We have conversation club. We have so many different things that can help the young people and help engage the people in the community as well. I think childcare has also been an issue in terms of, the wider community, being able to engage with CCOs or to be able to engage to learn new things as well. I think that's really important to have the wider perspective. Although, there's ways to adapt for young people, it's also adapting for their families as well. Because not all young people. So, say for instance, last week, I was running the PS kick session and some parents came by, and I popped out and I just said, "Oh, are you okay?" And they were like, "Yeah, we just wanted to see where our son was." For weeks and weeks he's been saying he's going to play football, but we've never seen, this place, or we've never seen where he actually goes. And just to check in, I said, "Yeah, you can feel free to stay, but this is where he is most of the time. He's a regular for me. So I know every Friday and every Saturday he's here." And just giving them parents that reassurance that the child is here, and that if to give them your number, and because they are open access sessions, as long as we've got all their details and stuff like that, they could come one week and not come the next week. They cannot come for a month and then come for the month after. So it's when you're with them, the time is paramount. So yeah, being adaptable for not only the young person but being adaptable for the family as well in terms of communication, I think is really important.
And I think that, just to touch upon a previous point, which I just remembered before we elaborated on sustainability, is that uniform and centralized system. So I might come in as the new youth manager, for example. I might take over from you, and I might go, actually, all right, for all the youth workers, all the staff under me, I now want you to deliver this provision in this manner, in this sort of framework. Whereby I think it's actually important that the approach where Michelle's youth manager and gone, actually, you've got autonomy to do that. You can do this. You can do that. These are the outcomes that we need to achieve as a foundation, as an organization. But in terms of
Yeah.
that delivery, I think that's really free upon yourself to do that. And I think that's really important as well. It's not to be centralized or uniform in a way that you do something, but to give autonomy to those around you, because you're then utilizing the skills of your staff and what they're able to do in terms of their youth work experience and what they may be able to bridge the gaps and overcome, or signpost, or go and do those outreach to engage people into a session, whether it be mobilely, whether it be trying to signpost them into a session where it's a center, etc. Utilizing those skills rather than that uniformed approach.
Yeah, I think the uniform approach can also throw a lot of young people off. But it's so paramount for their safety as well and their security. So it's having that balance is really important. I feel like for we also when I first started the role, I did send him. So it was multi-sport sessions for young people 18 to 25 who I'd send. And that was amazing to see. And it was amazing to engage those learners because, I guess we see personal development for young people 8 to 18, or I work with the older young people, so maybe let's say 13, 14 up. And but to engage with send young people is also great as well because say for instance when I first started I had one young person, so I was like, okay, next week what do you want to do, and then I could center more of the session if it was just him, have a different adaptation of the session for him, because I know he liked to goalkeep. I know he liked to one-on-ones. I knew he liked bib games. I knew he liked all these things from speaking to him and the time I had with him. So it's really getting to know them as best you can, catering to them as best you can, and like you said, yeah, being absolutely adaptable. Is just I think is key.
Absolutely. I think that's important as well, is catering towards their sort of needs. So some of the young people which I have in sort of my provisions, they like to sort of do a little bit of art. And when they do that art, they sort of calm down and they're willing to engage in their more academic pieces of work. They're writing their numeracy, etc. And we have then a really successful outcome whereby they might complete a sanctioned day. They've engaged in some academic work and I've catered towards their needs, and they've been very successful in terms of their outcomes. Whereby I have a very good colleague who doesn't like the artwork, is absolutely no chance on the artwork, and it's allocated by the teacher, and
Yeah.
it's very much bang, this is your academic work and you do this. He's very principled in his approach, and sometimes some young people react in certain ways and they don't like that he
Yeah.
hasn't catered to them. Whereas sometimes I'm like, well, actually, this young person's working for me. They're doing a little bit of that now. I've got them through a successful day. So I think, it's not giving in to the young person, but just catering towards their needs and having that adaptability and just understanding them. You are actually going to have some successful outcomes whereby you're utilizing that relationship. You've had that buy-in. You utilize what they like, and now therefore you can build upon what you might not have previously got. So they might respond, they might kick off, and therefore they've been unsuccessful in a day, or they've actually engaged in some work. They've done more than they would have usually done. They've engaged in other aspects which they never previously engaged in, and they've been successful in their day. So I think it's that combination of skills, combination of understanding people, those relationships, which are absolutely critical.
Yeah, no, I think really understanding to the youth. I think a lot of young people, they just want to be heard. So
Mm.
hearing them and doing something about it with that action. So at the football club, I started a youth committee for young people. So when it comes to policies, when it comes to youth media, it's a massive one we're looking at creating a youth media page and allowing it to be youth led, and allowing it to be somewhat of a notification, because we understand that young people are more on social media. So that's really important, and really understanding to listening to our young people and trying to facilitate as best we can. Of course, we have to keep principles in check. They can't run things, but they can definitely have an opinion, and we should definitely listen to that opinion, and act on it if applicable. So absolutely, having that youth committee has been very helpful. Having reflections with young people is very helpful. And yeah, I think listening to young people is a thing that has been so difficult. I think growing up as a young person myself, and then being on the flip side of it, being an adult, and thinking, how much do young people actually get heard?
Mm.
Because in my eyes, sometimes I see young people and they're not heard because they're young people. So sometimes it can be a level of prejudice towards young people due to their age when it comes to making decisions, which I find can be difficult, and it is quite upsetting. When young people tell me about things that they've engaged with their teachers, or they're not listening to me. When I hear, oh, but they're not listening to me, it's like, okay, everyone needs to take a step back and really listen to what they're saying, and then move forward from that. But yeah, definitely being heard and allowing young people to feel listened to is so paramount with you working with young people. And of course, you have your own agendas, you have your own aims, you have things they need to achieve and learn out of this session. However, you also need to understand it's for them. Everything we're doing is for them. So you can't not listen to what they have to say. I think is very important.
I 100% with you, and I'm completely on the agreement with you in terms of that understanding of what they have to say. And I think that's actually interesting in terms of if you were to present that as a questionnaire or do some research behind it, how often young people are listened to or how they feel listened to. And I think the projection or the outcome of that would be very, very low in terms of whether they would feel that they are listened to or not. So I think that would be an interesting piece. And I think sometimes that sort of work isn't conducted by sort of some professions or some areas because they don't want to see the results because they believe that they're delivering on these outcomes.
Yeah. I feel like in an educational setting, in a teaching setting, it can be different. It's difficult because, like I said earlier, like the main aim is to ensure they have the best grades, so they have the best chance of whatever avenue they want to approach in life. Understand it, get it. But like I said, some young people aren't academics. Some people don't love academics. They're more hands-on, or they're more practical learners. And school, unfortunately, a lot of it is consumption of information and regurgitation, and you know, portraying that through coursework, exams, and stuff like that, which it works for some people, and it's totally fine, and it is great, and it's worked for me. I've got my degree, I've got my A levels, I've got my GCSEs. It's been amazing. However, I know working with some young people that they just can't sit and focus. They struggle, and giving them something more hands-on is the way forward. So yeah, I do, yeah, I get it. But it's definitely an avenue which has helped many, and it will help a lot. But just to look at that wider scope is also very important as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, again, agree with you, and I'm completely on the same level page as you. But when you have that scope, that understanding, that why, that reflection, that sort of piece where you can utilize that relationship and communicate with young people. So you're delivering a session. It might be a 2 hour session whereby you're just doing a futsal session, for example. And
Yes.
again, it's very open access in terms of who can attend. They might come in for half hour, they might leave, they might come halfway through and stay for the next hour, etc. But you've got, Alex, who's attended the session. Now he's come in. in and he's a little bit all over the place. He's someone who engages every now and then. So he's attended your session and he's sworn quite a few times. You've
Right.
addressed this with him. You may have given him a warning perhaps and just
Mm.
said, it's not appropriate. But he continues to defy the session. It continues to, upscale the sort of levels of behavior which you might not expect or warrant within your session. Now he's continuously, taking the mick. He's, maybe smashed the ball away. He's upset a couple of the others. They've left. He's continued
Yeah.
to swear. How would you deal with Alex in that sort of situation? Because I know I've been in that situation. I know it's tough. I know the outcomes, and I know there's people who might have that sort of similar situation, and they don't
Yeah.
know how to address it because they might go, right, no, you're banned for a few weeks. They might go, actually, I want you to leave that session. Therefore, you've lost that engagement because they don't want to come back. So I think it's a very fine line. But how would you go about dealing with Alex in that situation?
I think there's steps of prevention. I think to ban him is like, it's a bit crazy. Like I do understand and I do sympathize with the others and stuff like that. I would pull him aside and have that conversation, really see what the issue is, because there's something up with Alex. It's not, if especially if he doesn't act out regularly, I think there's something up with Alex. So instead of having that approach in telling him off, I guess he wants that reaction from you. He wants that attention. So I would hope I'm with somebody else, depending on the ratio, and allow them to engage. Say, for instance, we're doing football, we're doing sports. Usually, I debrief with the person I'm working with, so they know what's going on, and then hopefully, they'll run that session, and I'll obviously oversight as well. But I'll speak to Alex, see what's going on, speak to him about how his day is, if there's anything we can do, what's up with him, and explain to him his behavior and why it's why it can be difficult, and then explain the impact it's having on other people, um, and hopefully he receives well to that information. If not, then eventually it will have to escalate. Then I'll have to report it, CPOMs it, and flag whoever else needs to know. But hopefully, if I do ban and end up banning him, or allow that time to be reflection time the next time he comes, to understand, this is not on and this is why it's not on. And then from there we can go, because in my head I'm still giving them the benefit of the doubt, like they don't know what they're doing is incorrect, or what they're doing is can be seen to be disruptive. And then if he says, okay, oh, it's fine, Michelle, reta, I'll feed him back into the session and see how it goes. And then, of course, I'll speak to the others and let him know that I've spoken to him, and moving forward that shouldn't be an issue. And then if he still reacts well, then amazing. But if he doesn't, I'll have to then go down the escalation route in terms of him not attending this session, or him having to sit out, or I'll end up giving him some responsibility, telling him to ref games, tell him to help me with kit, because I do have some young people who turn up and they don't want to engage. Like, some of them don't want to engage into the open access sessions, and they just want to chill and be around their friends, and that's fine. But we can just, some of them just want to hang out, and that's fine. We can have that conversation. How's school going? Or you know how can we best help you? What do you want to do in the future? Conversations that they might not have with people, or people haven't spoken to them. I know with some young people, they haven't been taught about money yet. I think money is a big one, like ingoings and outgoings and debts, and how to create good debts and stuff like that. So yeah, I just hope Alex understands what he's done and why he's done it, and doesn't do it again. And if he continues to do it and knows what he's doing is wrong, then the escalation process and calling the parents, seeing what's up, and yeah.
Because I think that's very important, because you might have that extreme whereby, right, Alex, you're banned, boom, straight out of the session. That can be a very easy, but also sometimes if you're in a high pressure situation and environment and you're trying to have that prevention, so you can understand why some people might escalate to that straight away, whether they're
Yeah.
facilitating that. But I think when it comes to it, you don't want to ban them straight away, because it might put them off in terms of that engagement. And next week they might come in with a very different set of minds. You might see a very different side to Alex. And last week might have just been a one-off. They might have just had a situation before they've come into the session, because they're in a youth environment, and the whole point of the open access is for them to engage and come away from that, and for all these other reasons that it's delivered. But I think if you were then to address that, it's difficult, because you don't want to turn away the other kids and put them off coming, but then you
Yeah.
also want to make sure that Alex is still engaging. So it's a very fine line sometimes as a youth worker, as a facilitator, to be in that position, and it can be difficult.
No, I do feel like that situation is difficult, but it's very situation dependent. I think external things are things that, us as youth workers, as facilitators, do need to consider. If I have Alex, and Alex is usually, medium behavior, he's not an awful kid. He likes to get a bit leery here, there. He likes to, mess around with some of the kids. Boys will be boys, or girls will be girls, or teens will be teens. So you have to be able to differentiate. Are they just acting up? Are they just being Larry? Are they just, really enjoying to, okay, this boy or this girl is really causing an issue now, that, I'm gonna have to sit them out, I'm gonna have to pull them out of the situation and then dissect what's really going on. Because I think from a coach perspective, from a sports perspective, that's straight disruption. So it's one where you have to pull it really quickly so it doesn't default the rest of your session. From a youth perspective, I think, okay, I understand pulling from the session, but the steps you take after can really direct where that young person's going to go. Say for instance, he's came to your session, or she's came to your session, and they're having a really tough time at home, and they don't know how to deal with it. They've kind of reacted in your session, and it's gone left. And from there, they just don't know how to cope. They also could be a victim of grooming for, like, county lines. From there, you've got to look at it is, say if you ban that kid and you never speak to him again, where are they going to go? They're going to go to that person who's trying to groom in the county lines. Whereas if you're there, you're giving them, okay, say, okay, you can't play, but you're going to help me with kit. You can't play, but you're going to help me ref. Still have them included, or still have them around. Um, and then explain to the other kids, okay, he or she's not having a great time, and I'm sorry, and moving forward, this won't happen again, and we'll pull it a lot quicker, or we'll raise it and deal with the issue a lot quicker, because like I said, like you said, all the young people are important, and they are important, but yeah, trying to attack it as soon as you can, but with grace, I think, is very important.
Absolutely, I'm completely with you there as well. Because as you might ban someone, you might push them into a more negative situation again. Whether that might be county lines, for example, that's actually worse off for them. So trying to keep them engaged in that session, or whether it's dealing with that situation, whether it takes 20 minutes, whether it's building upon that over the next few weeks, is actually
Yeah,
more important than it would be detrimental than pushing them out or banning them from a session. So that type of work is really important, and hence the importance of youth work, hence the importance of trying to have these sessions, because you might have, and I love having these conversations. So the whole point is to try and create reflective thinking as we speak from those
yeah.
who are listening, and to try and break those different thought areas. And for someone who might listen, might go, actually, I disagree with what Michelle said there. I think we need systems, and it shouldn't
Got to
be.
ban them straight away. You've got to ban
Yeah,
them.
yeah, and they might go, do you know what? It actually doesn't depend on the situation. Whereas we're sitting here actually going, it does depend. So we might create a listener to think on a different situation and go, well, actually, that actually makes more sense for us to do that. And I might approach that in my club, and we might have that conversation about changing the systems, etc. And I think that's really important, because sometimes you might have that systematic view, and therefore it's detrimental, where a coach might be listening and go, actually, at my grassroots club, we got a kid who might do X, Y, and Z, and therefore they might be up for a straight out ban for 2 weeks' time, or they might be banned from a game on a weekend. And sometimes there is systems in a place at a club or an organization, but if you have those sort of elements where you can understand the situation, you can overcome that, you can prevent a ban, you can build upon those relationships. You might say, right, you might have, you're not going to be banned this weekend, but you might be limited on your game time because of X, Y, and Z. So you're still
100%.
engaging them, you're still involving them, but they're understanding there is a little bit of an outcome because of their behaviors in terms of that, and you're not completely disengaging them at all. So I think there is an approach to take at times, and I see it in terms of education as well at times, whereby when I first started the job that I'm in now, I was like, right, why aren't we doing X, Y, and Z to do this? And sometimes I feel there is a position for us to improve on doing that, because there are some straight up situations. But when it comes to our more serious situations, that is a situational dependent outcome, whereby actually this actually happened beforehand, we've seen a little bit of this, so it actually doesn't determine this outcome. So I think it all
Yeah.
depends in terms of that young person, that situation, understanding it. And I think that's where the real importance of the work with the young people comes into play.
No, 100%. I feel like I've been in situations where um the young people I've dealt with have acted in a disruptive, let's say to speak, way. And instead of writing them off, you find out that externally so and so's happened. That's why, I suppose they act like that, but they don't have that actualization until you connect the dots, and you connect the dots for them. And I feel like not every young person is emotionally aware. You tell an 11-year-old, or what they're doing is crazy, and this is why you're doing it. What degree and what level do you then cut it off, or do you then discipline them? You've got to be able to, like I said, have that relationship with that young person. And even if you don't, say you're a newcomer, you're in a situation where it's your first session, you have like one kid acting up, being disruptive. You I guess you've got to pull them and still give them that grace, as in, you know this is what you're doing, this is why you shouldn't do it. Like, it's coming back to that why, and helping them establish, this is why we don't do it, and this is why you've done it, and this is what we're going to do moving forward. And then from there, if you need to ban them, if you need to take precautions, if you need to take whatever measures, fine. But I feel like we should give them that grace, and not write them off straight away.
Again, I think that's important, because giving them that grace, giving them that little bit of space, I think is really important, because you might do the extreme, you might jump straight to a situation or outcome, and therefore you might again disengage them, or you might lose them completely. So I think just giving them that bit of breathing space is really important. And sometimes we lose and lack the time of that opportunity to do so, and we are limited in terms of that space and that opportunity to facilitate that. But I think if we can just afford and adapt our sessions, adapt our approach, just to take that little bit of time, or a little bit of allocation to support them, I think it's really important play in terms of working with the young people that we have in front of us.
Yeah, I think also, like, a perspective of a coach and a perspective of a youth worker or a youth facilitator can differ. I guess with the coach, the outcome is they've got to learn these drills, they've got to learn, formation, they've got to learn precision, they've got to learn whatever it may be. And that's the aim of them being there. Whereas a youth worker is more personal development. Whereas a coach is more, you're kind of paying to be here, or, we're trying to get you as far as we can. It is a level of development. And I guess by default, it is personal development. But as a youth worker, you're purely focusing on their personal development, and external things as well, and ensuring they're enjoying their time, ensuring they're safe, ensuring they're in a safe space. But I suppose with the coach, and when you're coaching, it's more, okay, today we're doing crossbar, we're working on set pieces or whatever it may be. Whereas youth work, I'd say it's a little different. I understand how the two can cross over and the two do mesh. um but I feel like in terms of that extreme where we ban the young person, I think the coach might lean into it a bit more, because they have a firmer objective, as in, this is what I'm doing, you're really stopping me in my forefront of doing it. So see ya. Whereas youth led, it's more, okay, it should be about caring about the young person, really.
And I think that's important in terms of that different outlook of those positions. So an educator, a coach might have different hats, etc. And I know when I was, a team manager, but then we ended up founding a football club, and I was appointed chairman. I had to have very many different hats which I had to wear. So someone might come to me and go, actually, this child's misbehaving, and I don't want to see that in the session for my child. And I'm like, well, as a chairman, I need to look at it from participation, engagement, support, looking at the type of community that we're in, the diversity of it. And when we set up as a football club, we went into a very diverse community, whereby a lot of barriers, a lot of FSM sort of
Okay.
area, geographical area, and therefore the kids that we previously had engaged with us and the kids that we started to recruit were very different in terms of personality and upbringing. So as my job as chairman was then to gel that, bring that together, to look at how we portrayed that and marketed it, in terms of how that would come across to parents, just to give us that time, because we didn't want to turn these kids away. We wanted to bring them into place. So rather than being just a football club, we ended up becoming a community club, and therefore that
Amazing.
community club had to be positioned in terms of very different mindset, a very different outlook. So it took a lot of our work and time to work with the parents, with the stakeholders, the carers, the families, to sort of understand that there is going to take time to build up some of the expectations, to build up a framework for us to engage with some of these parents, because there's some of the kids coming off the estate that they're on. They might just turn up to a session and expect that they're just coming here to play football, and we might not see the parents to engage with them to talk about some of the misbehaviors that we're seeing, for us to have that reflective piece. So therefore it's going to take a little bit of time for us to get those parents into sessions, and then we can start to have conversations. But for the time being, you need to act as those role models on the sideline as the adults,
Yeah.
whereby you're going to be seen in the light for these kids where, oh, my mum and dad ain't here, but these parents are here, and they might not understand why these parents are here, or they might not understand that. So there's a lot of perspective, a lot of bridge building from the position that you're in, which comes into a big piece of play. And for you as a youth manager, when you've got a member of staff approaching, you've got a young person, then those above you come in for KPIs. They're all very different outlooks and perspectives that you got to go into different meetings with.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, 100%. When you work with external providers, it's like what's the main aim, and sometimes it's looking at mutual benefits. When you're speaking with your managers, what we're trying to do, what programs can we get, and what funding can we get, and when it's with the young people, it's like you've got to kind of bin all that off and you're delivering. So it's like I've got to care about you. I've got to make sure my energy is top notch. I've got to make sure the environment I create, you feel comfortable. So I'm quite shameless in my approach. Like, I feel like with young people, I'm very shameless. In terms of, I don't mind. I don't really get embarrassed. So, like, with young people, they like a bit of banter, and I'm happy to do that, and that's fine. Some of them have nicknames for me. So it's like creating that environment where they're safe as well. And, with young people, you wear that hat. And then with, external providers, you wear that hat and that meeting and that conference. And, sometimes, if you have to pop in and help out with coaching, that's a different hat. And then I guess, with the younger ones, it's like making sure they've had their water, making sure, we've eaten, taking them to lunch. And because when I was away, because I worked at a Christian camp in America in summer of 2022, for a couple of months. And for the first section of it, I had 12 to 16-year-olds. Towards the end of it, I had 8 to 10-year-olds. And the age difference is crazy. They can look after themselves. The older ones can physically look after themselves in terms of get dressed and get ready and stuff like that. And with the younger have their water bottles filled, because it was hot in the summer. And with the younger ones, we've got to make sure in the morning everyone got their water bottles filled. This is the time we're eating lunch, and you take on that maternal role by default, because now I had about up to 17 young boys every day, like Monday to Friday. So I had to make sure they were fed. I had to make sure they were all at their activities. I had to make sure they, did their study. So it was, you take on that maternal role, and then, handing back over to their parents. This is how he's done today. This is, so you take on the teaching role, because when you have to deliver and you teach these young people, especially I know for NCS, I teach you know finances, work readiness, employability, independent living. You're prepping them and you're getting ready, and you have to, I somewhat teach that element and make sure they know that content. So yeah, you take on many different roles as, I guess, someone who's in the youth environment, and like you said, role models. So how you conduct yourself, from the mannerisms, from the language, from how you present yourself is so important. From how you look to how you talk, to the things you say is very important, for sure.
Absolutely, and I'm completely with you there. And whilst you're saying that, I think it's very important in terms of how you deliver and communicate with certain young people and their stakeholders as well. So I can think of one young person which engaged with us, and from a very diverse background, whereby the finances were very limited, and therefore what they had to wear to sessions wasn't what they needed to wear to sessions, and perhaps limited them in terms of their movements, because they weren't wearing the right type of clothing, etc.
Yeah.
Then we ended up having a few sort of parents, stakeholders come forward willing to donate to this young person. Now we had to present that in a way whereby, yes, that's great, well, thank you very much for that, but if we
Yeah.
just give it to this young person, they go home with it, how would their stakeholders at home perceive that, and how would they
100%.
feel around that? And I think it was very important for us to build that bridge and sort sort of have that conversation with the other stakeholders for them to understand why they were receiving these sort of items and why this support was being in place. And we were very fortunate whereby these stakeholders were very supportive to donate, and we had stakeholders who were receiving who understood the situation, who were very thankful for the support that they received, and they were very grateful. And that gratefulness ended up building a great community environment. We ended up creating a new scheme because of it in terms of a donation scheme and recycle, and therefore we donated it to our younger groups just as a natural program, and then we could look at specific sort of individual cases which were presented, and it ended up being a very fascinating insight in terms of our community that we adopted because we weren't from the community. We sort of brought a club in and went, we're
Amazing.
here now. And when you sort of plonk yourself in a community and go, right, we're here, we're doing this, you have to consider a lot of the different outlets. But when that came into play, there was a huge scope in terms of how we supported that young person, but then how we presented that. So I think when you work with different communities, different groups, as you said earlier on, I think it's very important to understand those cultural differences, those backgrounds, those diversities, how that perception and that reception might be taken into context, etc. So a lot of important concepts which you've spoken about tonight, Michelle, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I think I'm just glad that I'm grateful that you've, asked me to come on and have this conversation about how we can, support the youth and what I do and, moving forward, if anyone's listening and they want to get in contact with any ideas or any best practice, I'm absolutely all ears.
Absolutely, I love that, and I think if you're from Lincoln Football Club Foundation, and I was looking earlier on the Lincolnshire Football Club FA or FA, sorry, and there was a common contact which you might know, but someone who's previously been on a pod, and that is Sophie Bartup, who appeared in terms of the Lincoln FA. So that is nice to sort of
Nice.
have someone from a same sort of environment, the community, to be
Yeah.
on without having that mutual connection by setting us up whereby we've connected and created that sort of community from who's appeared on. But it's great work in terms of what you're doing, especially as I said, in terms of what you share on LinkedIn and on your social. So keep up the great work, and for you to be on a podcast call after a long day in work and delivery, and to be on in the
Thank you.
evening, I do really appreciate it. But I'm loving what you're doing, and I hope that this finds a lot of ears and a lot of minds some important thoughts and considerations.
No, thank you. If anyone also has any funding for youth programs, you know where I am. But yeah, no, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Well, take care. Have a good evening, and I'm so thankful for the way you set this up and how easy it was. And thank you for your time.
And you.
No
Thank
worries.
you.
We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
But yeah, we try to be that group that can help be there for the players as a three, because I think you mentioned earlier, you want to have different characters in the changing room. You want to have different personalities. You don't want the same kind of people because you're not going to be able to move forward. If you've got 10 people and they all agree the same things, you're going to get to a point in time where actually you're going to become unstuck. You need that one person to actually be like, nah, I don't agree with that. Or actually, we should try this. And I think that's why the huddle works, is we're all quite different as human beings. And I think you need three different people in there, because some players will naturally gravitate towards me and my personality, but equally some might go to the other two, and that's absolutely fine.